Wow, it feels weird to record without any game in the background. Just a quick intro. I'm going to show you the montage I sort of threw together. I just sort of flipped on OBS whenever a cool moment was happening. And I tried to show off, of course, a lot of the Moonshaker Cavalry plays we're going to be looking at, but of course, some of the earlier game, right, early on the curve interaction, which I think is more important in the Insidious Roots deck. So I hope you enjoy. Again, I'll show you the gameplay first, and then I think I'll talk about it at the end. The first version of the deck you will see at the end is going to be the main version that I played with, but I will definitely talk in circles about all the other different versions and what I learned along the way. I'm Diamond 2 now, almost a Mythic, so let's see if this deck can take me there. And again, I really appreciate it. So yes, I present to you Abzan Plant Cavalry. this is it. This is the deck that I played most of those games with over the course of the last week and playing about 100 different matches with this deck. I have tweaked a few things, added some cards, taken away some cards. I'm going to show you all of those and talk about all of those too. I want to give you a pretty in-depth sort of analysis of what I learned and the actual build that I have for you today. Now, first thing I will say, yes, there's 66 cards, but I don't want to scare away people. I added 2 more lands and 4 more actual cards, so pretty close to the ratio of a normal deck. And being that you're surveilling so much, you have a lot of control over what the top card of your deck is, so what you're going to draw. Also, you can curve out very nicely because, right, we're pretty much on ratio, and we also, of course, have Blanchwood Prowler, who's going to be ensuring that you can at least get to that 3rd mana, which is the critical amount of mana you need to really actually do things in this deck, right? So you probably saw some pretty cool interactions. Yes, we were slapping down Moonshaker Cavalry. That's what we're doing. Now, I have 2 copies of this card. If you have 4, I think you could build this deck a little bit differently. And being that you're going to have much more consistency in getting to your cavalry and putting it into the graveyard, and then just, relying on your Squirming Emergence, you could probably do a few things differently. Now, if you maybe played 4, you could maybe increase the amount of Bramble Familiar. This is a card that I thought about increasing more of, because when you do top deck something that you want in your graveyard, that discard a card thing is pretty nice. While it can, ramp you a few turns, which is pretty critical in the early game. And of course, I want to go over the main part of the deck for those of you who haven't seen the actual, sort of core synergy here. So, of course, Insidious Roots. This is the most important card in the deck. That's what we're trying to do today. We're trying to make a bunch of plants. We're going to use those plants to tap for mana, to then cast a bunch of cards out of our graveyard, and just hard cast our Moonshaker Cavalry. Of course, the first line of text is probably the most important, but of course, every time one of our creature cards are going to leave our graveyard, we're going to create a 0/1. We're going to put a counter on all of our plants. You can go so wide, so quickly, the opponents really can just die to the plants all swinging. You'll have 7, 8 plants, most of them like 5, 6, 4, 5s, all of that. It's gonna be really unexpected for most decks. Now, another thing I'll say right away: if you're looking for a super competitive best of 1 deck, you need to deal with the mono red decks going around. Right, you're gonna get hit with the Monstrous Rages, the Heartfire Heroes, the Cacophony Scamps, the Slick Shots. Those are still a problem, but you can actually turn a corner with this deck. You really can. So I went over this card. Let's go over Tyvar. This is going to allow all of your plants to tap as though they had haste, right? That first line of text, that static ability, is the most important part. Of course, the -2, right? You mill and then you bring back a card. Well, that is a creature card leaving your graveyard. So you're gonna get a creature, first of all, usually maybe a Blanchwood Prowler, which is gonna mill even more. But regardless of what you choose, you're gonna bring back a creature, you're gonna create a plant. That plant can immediately tap. Now, we have a really important... I think that the 1-drops here are cemented in the deck. I think these are the absolute best cards in all of Standard to be playing. We'll start with Snarling Gorehound, right? Every time one of these plants enter, or any of our small creatures, which are pretty much all small creatures, we're going to be Surveilling. That's super important for, again, fixing our top card of the deck when we need to get to our Squirming Emergence, but mostly just filling up the graveyard with a bunch of permanents to then allow us to cast, we need at least 8 permanents in the graveyard to get your Moonshaker. Another card that synergizes very well with putting permanents in the graveyard is, of course, Micro Tyrant, and I'll go into this guy in a second. This guy can actually be very insanely strong, being that it's going to create a bunch of these funguses, and they can actually immediately tap for mana as well, because they're tokens as well. Don't forget, the actual line of text is just creature tokens. It doesn't have to be the plants itself. So, that's Snarling Gorehound, a very huge enabler of the deck. Very important. Fairy Dream Thief is a flyer, which is really important, actually. You can get in a timely block against a Aclazotz, or just a Deep Cavern Bat, right? You lay this guy down, now Deep Cavern Bat can't just keep gaining life every turn. That's probably the primary interaction when you're blocking with this guy. And then later on, that 3 mana to draw a card Yes, it's 3 mana to draw a card, but you can get that timely Squirming Emergence right off the top. So this is very important. And while you cast it out of your graveyard, right, or when you use the ability out of your graveyard, that's a creature leaving your graveyard. So you'll create a plant, likely helping you to then immediately cast whatever you draw with, of course, Tyvar's static ability. So super good, super good. Now the other one dropped, Rumble Belt Maverick. This is awesome, right? Because it's Surveil 2, which is great, and the 1 mana removed from the graveyard thing is massive because you immediately do that. You create a plant. Well, now you've just immediately replaced that mana that you lost casting it, but you've also put a counter on all of your plants at the same time. You're building your board wider. You're creating the number of creatures on the field to be larger, making your Moonshaker Cavalries potent. If you have 2 Insidious Roots on the battlefield and you cast this guy out of your graveyard, you're actually going up on mana because you're creating 2 plants, right? So super good, as well as just making a creature slightly bigger, big enough to block. Usually you're going to put this on just something random like your Blanchwood Prowler, hoping that, okay, now it's a 2/2, it can block a random 2/2 that's going to do damage to you otherwise. So you do need to, of course, sort of coast, get to a certain point in the game where all of a sudden on just one turn you have this explosive, massive amount of plants and you win the game out of nowhere. So this is super important. Now the other thing about Snarling Gorehound is, right, the Surveil 1 whenever a cheap guy enters. So when you cast like a Rumble Belt when you already have Gorehound, right, you're Surveilling 2 from his ability, and you're Surveilling 1 right there. So that's 3 permanents most likely going into the graveyard. Absolutely great. You can like double spell a Fairy Thief and a Rumble Belt when you already have your Gorehound. It's a lot of surveilling. It is really good. Now, Blanchwood Prowler is going to, again, fix your mana. It's going to get you that land card that you really need, but it's also putting, most likely, a Rumble Belt into the graveyard or a Fairy Thief into the graveyard, which you can then immediately take advantage of later on in the game. So this is super duper important. Now, I sort of touched on Bramble Familiar, but again, this guy, right, discarding your Moonshaker is super important, as well as just once you do that, you can possibly, you can mill with the first half. So very synergistic. Again, if you have more copies of Moonshaker, possibly add more copies of Bramble. And I think you can cut some of these other cards. Now, I want to go over the random Orzhov cards in here because I didn't really show you too many highlights of them. There was a highlight with Campbell that I wanted to maybe show, but I ended up thinking it was a little lame. Um, this is a 3-drop that has a pretty good drain effect every time a token enters the battlefield, which is really nice. This is cool because it's 3 mana. You can get it with something like Lively Dirge. I think you saw a couple examples of Lively Dirge doing work. I want to play more copies of this card too, but again, this is not a permanent. So the sorceries that we have in here not being permanents can be a problem. So originally I had more copies, but then I ended up milling them, and then there wasn't permanents in the graveyard, so my Squirming Emergence couldn't get to the right size, this and that, this and that. So there's a balancing act with this deck, which I'll go into a little bit more. But Campbell's cool. You also have this, which is just power 2 or less in general, but it's 4 mana card. You also have the activated ability, which could be helpful sometimes. Because you're going to have a lot of mana with this deck. If your plants are on the field, untapped, you can threaten that activated ability. So it's kind of a unique card. I wanted to play 1-in-1 just to sort of show that this is what you can do. But again, at the end here, I'll sort of go over all of the cards that I ended up cutting and cards that possibly could be better than these cards. In fact, I'm sure they are. One thing I'll immediately show you is you could like get rid of Wisp Drinker and Campbell, add 2 more Chupacabras. That would be something. If you wanted more board wipes, you can add more Specters of Mortality. There's Gix command comes to mind, right, for wiping the board as well as getting 2 creatures out of your graveyard. There's other cards, there certainly is. Portophyrexia, you probably saw a few times I was scrolling through. That isn't in the list right now, but Portophyrexia was in here. I also tried a second Virtue. I had a second Izoni. There's a lot to talk about here, but I will go over that in just a second. So Cabra here, you could increase the copies, maybe up to 3, cut these 2 cards, something like that, because this is going to be an actual removal spell. It also is pretty synergistic with the meta in that, right, it lessens the power of Heartfire and Cacophony Scamp, which is everywhere. So when they die, you won't actually take any damage because they don't really have the power anymore, right? So that's sort of why some people are talking about Disfigure being better than Cut Down right now, because there really is a tremendous amount of mono red on the best of one ladder right now. So this is something to consider. This is, permanents in your graveyard. Another thing going along with that type of strategy. Spectre of Mortality, I'll talk about next, I guess. This is really good, but when you're exiling like 5 creatures out of your graveyard, well, there's 5 permanents leaving your graveyard. So all of a sudden, if you're trying to do your Squirming Emergence Moonshaker Cavalry combo, it's a little bit of a problem because it is quite a lot. You will mill so much because every plant that enters is going to like trigger Gorehound. You're surveilling even more. Tyvar is milling 3 cards. Your Blanchwood is milling 3 cards. It's not that hard. It's really not that hard to put like your whole deck in the graveyard. Just something to consider. If you really want to make this like viable against mono red, there's a slightly different way you can build this deck for sure. That's sort of up to you. I think that this deck does incredible against everything that doesn't include Monstrous Rage and Callous Sellsword and flinging for damage. Okay, so I actually just made a short about that a little bit ago. So No One Left Behind, really great card. You can get back some of these 3-drops, which is why I thought Campbell is pretty cool. Micro Tyrant, again, I'll probably go over him next year because I just realized I haven't really gone over him. But this guy I initially had 4 of because he's that good. But I ended up changing the direction of the deck. But this is nice because you can, of course, it sort of acts as another Squirming Emergence without actually the drawback. You can just get your Moonshaker if you happen to have this card. Instead, if you really need something else, if your Blanchwood gets milled into the graveyard, but you really need mana, you can just get a Blanchwood, right? That's not a horrible deal. It's only 2 mana, right? If you're targeting the converted mana cost 3 or less. So that's neat. Izoni here. Hopefully my head isn't covered. I think it's not. I tried to position it in a way. This card is super duper 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 good. First of all, it's like incredible. You can tell that it's sort of made. It's from the same set as Insidious Roots. You can sort of feel that it's meant to go in the Insidious Roots deck because, right, when you're collecting evidence, those are creature cards most likely leaving your graveyard. You're triggering that. You're getting a plant. You're also creating 2 spiders. You can immediately sacrifice those plants and spiders to surveil 2, draw 2, gain 2. Sometimes that is absolutely backbreaking because every turn creating tokens, you're doing that. Creating tokens, you're doing that. It also has menace, which is nice. It's better than it looks. The spiders have menace too, so really easily taking out planeswalkers, using at least one of them to block a stupid deep cavern bat or what have you. The menace reach combo of the spiders is really important because we don't really have any other flyers other than Fairy Dream Thief. So probably up a copy of Azoni. I wanted to show you, this is again the list that I was using for most of just the last week of recording, but I'm not certain by any means that it's the absolute best build of the deck. Just what I ended up playing with the most, I suppose. Now this card's cool because it's a permanent that does exactly what we want. And say we're unlucky and we mill all of our Squirming Emergences into the graveyard, which can happen. You can get really unlucky and just never actually draw one of these, and you end up keep milling them. So that's why we have No One Left Behind, and sometimes Virtue of Persistence. So this can be game winning for obvious reasons, but also it is a early removal spell, just a 1 more card that happens to do something like that. Again, we don't have much interaction. We're pretty vulnerable to just getting run over by either like mono green, huge big stompy guys, but again, most likely the mono red deck everywhere. So this is a pretty cool list. Tyvar and Insidious Roots on the field is mostly all you need to start going off, assuming maybe you have a Rumble Belt in there. 1 mana will start the chain, right? You saw the chain in the video, hopefully, and it's pretty dang powerful. So now, I suppose, I will go over some cards that you're like, probably like, why aren't they here? So these cards over here off to the right are going to be the cards that I cut that were initially in the deck that are definitely viable and could definitely be the right call. Notably, a lot of people are talking about Keen-Eye Curator. I'll go over him in just a second. There's also Osteo Adept, which goes pretty good with all of this too. Just cast something out of our graveyard. But there are reasons I'm not playing these guys. I'll go over in just a second. We also have Honest Rutstein. Pretty cool card. I initially had 4 of this guy in the deck because it was just like immediately get something out of the graveyard, and then everything that we had was a lot cheaper to cast. And I was playing alongside this guy, Hollow Marauder, which this guy is slept on because this guy can be cast for just 1 black mana pretty easily, especially if you have a rest sign. You're just throwing creatures into your graveyard, etc., etc. What I didn't like about this guy necessarily is I felt it was a balancing act because right when we're casting our Fairy Dream Thief, or when we're using the ability of both of these guys, we are taking creatures out of the graveyard, which then increases the cost of this guy. And then you can't easily Squirming Emergence because the actual converted mana cost is 7, so there's like a balancing act there. But this is basically forcing them to discard a card, and we draw a card. It's also a 4 power flyer, which is really nice. You can use it to just block a problematic guy on the ground, or just fly over to kind of end the game that way. I think that there's a better deck for this guy, for sure, but it's something to consider. Of course, Protophyrexia is awesome, right? Because every single turn, we are going to, it's basically like a Virtue of Persistence, but we're also sort of wiping 3 of their creatures when we Squirming Emergence it. Probably a great call. Probably a great call. Maybe throw 1 in just for fun. Can't go wrong there. I was playing a lot with it, and I think it's the way to go. Now, Keen-Eye Curator, the thing about this is it's obviously super synergistic. For 1 mana, we can get a plant. If Tyvar is on the field, we can, of course, do it again. And then we can do it 4 times. We have a 7/7 trample. Now, it's sort of the same problem with, again, we want those permanents in the graveyard. So when I would do this sometimes, I would like exile 4 creatures, not taking advantage of the abilities that they already have out of the graveyard, right? This guy's going to draw you a card. This guy's just 1 mana to basically do the same thing. It just felt a little bit clunky. I know that Ash Lozelle made a video. I've seen a couple other people praising this card with this archetype. But I just felt like I would do this. I would get a 7/7. I would pass. He would immediately get removed. Then I wouldn't have a creature. And I also wouldn't have permanents in my graveyard. So I'd be like, Of course, it's like a dies to removal argument, whatever. I just don't know. I would just rather like 3 Bramble Familiars or something like that in here over 3 of Keen-Eye Curator if you're, really trying to just put cards in your graveyard or just ramp to the big rampy point that you're trying to do. I think that this might not make my cut, but I could absolutely see it making many of yours. Of course, I've seen the Agatha Soul Cauldron combination with this, right? You can Agatha this ability. You can exile this with Agatha, get this ability, put it on one of your guys, continue the ability. I would build a deck in a different way where pretty much all of your cards are creatures, other than Insidious Roots. Maybe, well, I guess you pretty much have to have Squirming Emergence, but yeah, you can see the problems there. It is a balancing act, and I just think that it's an all-in strategy on your 2-drop, which is fine sometimes, but it's not necessarily how I was trying to win the game. I was just trying to freaking Moonshaker all day, baby. And we're surveilling so much that even just with 2 copies of Moonshaker, it was pretty damn consistent, man. I don't know what to tell you. I would say maybe 3 copies is the magic number, but that's a point that I probably already made already. Anyway, Osteomancer Adept. So I think that maybe I want to add 1 copy of this guy. Like, I could see myself cutting. I'm going to totally butcher the deck now. You cut Cambo. You cut your Wisp Drinker. You cut your Plains from the mana base. You add a Swamp. Again, I'm liking the 66 number. If you want to go down, cut your 2 Swamps, right? Let's cut all these cards that I just talked about. Goodbye. Do I want a Rutstein? We'll keep him around for a second. I'm cutting Keen-Eye. I'm going to cut Spectre. Am I cutting Spectre? Let's cut Spectre. I'm going to go down to 1 Bramble. Put this guy over here. Put this guy in the 3-drop slot. 63 cards. Oops. I would probably at this point. I would cut Virtue. Virtue's actually slow and clunky. Probably no one left behind, and we'll just hope we get our Squirming. We go back here. We look at it now. We need to cut one card. Do I want more removal? Do I want 2 Chupacabra Echo all day? Maybe I want 4 of this guy. Maybe I don't want my Lively Dirge. It's a little bit clunky. Because really, you need to cast it for 5 mana to do the very powerful effect. Or 4 mana if you already have both the cards in your graveyard. Now it's looking a little bit better, but we still have a Cabra problem. Maybe we cut this down to 3. Maybe we cut Redstein. Maybe we do, because we don't actually have that many big creatures that we're trying to cast. And if we do, we're not struggling to get 4 mana in this deck, so I think that's fine. So maybe we cut Redstein. So now we're down to 61 again. Maybe we go down to 2 copies here. Do we like this? Maybe I really like Azoni, and I actually really do like Azoni. So I'm going to up the copy there. Which one do I cut here? Probably one Fairy Dream Thief. Maybe one Fairy Dream Thief. Because it is a little bit more expensive to do the activated ability out of the graveyard. And we do have just like some pretty good, we added the Squirrel now. We have the Bramble still. Blanchwood is going to do the thing. It's going to get us to 3 mana. Get to 3 mana Tyvar. You could have a deck that looks like this. And I think this is really damn good. If you maybe don't even like Azoni that much for whatever reason, you could, of course, add that Portal to Phyrexia, right? You could maybe bring back the Virtue of Persistence. You could, if you're really into the consistency, and I really do think the consistency is very important, yeah, I think this might be a nice build for you too. So there's different ways to do it. Osteo's pretty nice. I would, experiment with the amount of mana and stuff that you have. The 1 planes was pretty much to cast those 2 guys that I had, right? The other thing is we are running 4 of the Surveil lands. So that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to surveil. We're, really into that, and that is going to be another permanent going into the graveyard. You could also go the 4 Micro Tyrant route. Let me move my head. 4 Micro Tyrants, and not bad at all, right? This is incredible on turn 3, right? If you slap this guy down, you usually won't get a tremendous amount of fungus tokens that turn, unless you do have Gorehound on the field. That is at least 1 Surveil with Micro, which is pretty nice. But the next turn, you slap down your Tyvar, right? He mills 3. Your Blanchwood mills 3. You cast a 1-drop as well, milling another one. All of a sudden, this guy's going to be like, he's going to create like 7 fungus tokens, and he's going to be an 8/8. It's really good, man. It's really, really good. He also has trample, so he can actually be a viable swinger later on when it's not that important that he sticks around anymore, and you've already tapped for a bazillion mana with those fungus. Definitely something to consider. You could go all in like that. You could maybe cut the Astio. You could maybe cut the Chupacabra almost entirely. And if you had 4 Moonshakers, you could do something like that. You could even cut Azoni, right? You could cut the Bramble. You could cut the Azoni, and you could do this. This would be the most streamlined version of this deck that I honestly think this, man, if I had 2 mythics, I might just actually spend it on 2 cavalries, because that would be fun to see how consistent it is. So I think that's a pretty good analysis of the deck. I don't want to like drag it on, but I just want to say I had so much fun playing with this deck. A little bit of a different type of video and format of video and ordering of the content, but I hope you give it a shot. I hope you're not too scared of all of the stupid mono red decks right now. You're right. Sometimes you're gonna lay your Gorehound. No, they're gonna start the game, right? They're gonna lay their Monetary Slip Spear or what have you. You're gonna lay your Gorehound. You're like, great, I got a Roots. You lay your Roots. Well, that next turn they swing with like 3 red creatures, one of them with a Monstrous Rage, and you're like, I'm feeling like I'm a little behind. I'm not sure, because we don't really have any removal interaction, right? It's all in on a streamlined strategy to Moonshaker, but you're gonna die before that point. So that's why for Chupacabras, maybe 4 of those Spectre cards, maybe lessen the amount, maybe take out the Squirming Emergence. Maybe you don't even do the Moonshaker. There's so many ways to build this deck. Right, there's the Sultai version. There's a really good 2-drop that mills 4 cards, right? And it's a non-creature, non-land card that you can bring back, which actually helps you find your Insidious Roots. There's, of course, right, you could, instead of creatures, do mostly instants and sorceries and stuff, and there's tons of cards taking advantage of the number of instant sorceries in your graveyard, too. You could have your Squirming Emergence as a sorcery, looking for that one actual permanent that you're trying to play, whether it be Moonshaker, I kind of doubt it in that build, or just a huge, a super synergistic, crazy creature that lets you, copy sorceries and instants and all of that. There's tons. There's tons in standard right now. It's a lot of fun to experiment with stuff like this. I think it's cool that we're looking at maybe like this build of the deck at the end here, because these are the most important cards that we're looking at right here. And yeah, Abzan plants. Whether you call it Abzan or Golgari is up to you. One thing I guess I'll say while I still have your attention, if you're interested, is like, having 1 planes was pretty much only to hard cast those guys if we happen to have them in our hand. It's not so hard to have 3 plants to just get those 3 white mana pips, and again, most of the time you're not even trying to hard cast it. There was many times I could over the last week or so playing this deck, but I've actually got a tons of wins. I've been going up in rank with this deck, right? It's not like it's bad. It's not like it's bad. I haven't been playing nearly as much as I wanted to, and I'm in Diamond 2, right? I could probably, not easily, but I could definitely hit Mythic with this deck. I've ran into some frustrating matchups recently that weren't even mono-red. It was like the all counter spell decks, the Azorius control, the even the Cruel Claw, right? The like all mythic Cruel Claw build that I've seen a couple times is actually really nice with like the, what is it, like Devastator of Misery. Right, you need 4 of those. You need 4 of your Trumpeting Carnosaurs. You need 4 of the Virtue of Persistence. There's a lot of mythics. It's really, but that like actual build, people that spent like $1 bazillion on that, is like really really good. With, I think you use like Charming Scoundrel as a creature that's also a discard thing. And there's also the haste version, which my last standard deck, if you're interested in that, was exactly that, with Cunning Coyote and the, what was it, Trailblazing Historian. Yeah, so check that one out if you are interested. But yeah, you will be surprised about how Surveilling is almost like drawing a card in a way, right? If you're and don't underestimate Gorehound, man. This guy, every single plant, every single creature, every time Blanchwood, we're surveilling a lot with the Gorehound. But yeah, I think I've talked in circles a few times. If you like the video, I'll love you, and I hope you have a great day. Good luck on the arena. If you try this, I will put the the 66 card version of the deck in the description. I hope you don't think it's too cringe. I really don't when you're surveilling so much cards into your graveyard. 6 extra cards isn't that much of a problem. Most of the copies of at least the important cards are 4 of, so we still have a pretty decent amount of consistency. Yes, having 6 extra cards is preventing you from maybe the turn 2 Insidious Roots, because it's slightly less hard to find, but that's the balancing act that I was playing, and I ended up thinking 66 was fine. 2 more Swamps, add 4 more cards of your choice, 4 more Cobras in here, right? This was the version of the deck that I was running for a while. This is initially, other than the Moonshakers, I was like, wait. So what did I have in here? Oh, I had 2 Azonies, right? I had 2 Azonies, but I probably already covered that. Anyway, I just can't stop talking. I just hope you try this. I really do. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next video. Check out my shorts if you're interested. I'm finally doing those. Those were kind of fun. And I promise I will be more consistent and not wait like a whole week before I come out with another freaking deck tech. Try to do one tomorrow. I really will. Promise you. Pinky promise. I'll cut that out. Later.